Okay, so we had a very nice PowerPoint presentation with, but unfortunately the PDF doesn't want to work here on the screen, so we have to do it without very nice fonts that we had. Anyway, so we're Joe and Kirsten from European Digital Rights. We're based in Brussels, where we're advocating and campaigning for civil and human rights in the digital environment. So we are working to help activists get more involved on a European level and to shape good technology policies. So EDRI was founded in 2002, but it was only in 2009 that Joe here opened the office in Brussels. And the reason for this development was that citizens were being more and more confronted with EU legislative proposals that have a direct impact on our rights and freedoms. So in 2009, EDRI was a network of 29 NGOs from all over Europe, and it was high time that we are being represented better on EU level and that we were coordinating ourselves better. So today, there are already 36 organizations that are part of EDRI. In Germany, there's, for example, the Chaos Computer Club, Digitale Gesellschaft, or Digital Courage. And so the European election will take place in about 2 weeks, and this could mean a big change in Europe's political landscape. Today we want to give you an overview of what we have been fighting for in Europe in the past 5 years, and we want to look at how the European elections can be used as a unique opportunity for action. So we want to show you why it is important to prevent that bad proposals that we have killed in the past return now from the dead. And we want to share some ideas with you on how to achieve this. So from 2009 till 2014, we fought many battles. The 5 most important ones were web blocking, Acta, CleanIT, data retention, and Net Neutrality.
So in March 2009, the European Commission made a proposal in a framework decision that it should be mandatory to have web blocking in all EU member states. This proposal was then relaunched in March 2010 after the big Zensursula discussions in Germany. And we had a 1-year campaign where we were pretty much on our own arguing that there shouldn't be mandatory web blocking in Europe. And with a lot of effort, working quite a lot with German parliamentarians and with parliamentarians across Europe, we managed to get a big majority to reject the idea that there should be mandatory web blocking as a part of European legislation. Subsequent to that, the European Parliament has this very annoying habit of what they call non-legislative resolutions, which means that every few months there's a new proposal where MEPs talk about what they might like to do in the future. 2 examples just last year were a resolution on gambling, where the Internal Market and Consumer Committee suggested that there should be internet blocking, and then we had to launch a campaign for the plenary of the Parliament to change that. The European Parliament is sometimes half asleep and passes rather strange texts. So as a result of our campaign, they got rid of the mandatory web blocking and replaced it with the rather imaginative proposal that best practice would be establishing white and black lists of illegal gambling websites. What exactly a whitelist of illegal gambling websites might be is a complete mystery to everyone involved, including us. Similarly, in 2013, there was a proposal from the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee to ban all forms of pornography in the media. And this ban would be implemented not by law, but by a voluntary code of conduct where internet companies would decide what people should and shouldn't see and impose a values framework around users' use of the internet. So there are 3 examples in the last 12 years, and there are others, of proposals for web blocking that we successfully killed.
So one of our most important battles was the fight against Acta, and yeah, I think it's probably the most important one from the last 5 years. EDRI and many other NGOs fought for the rejection of the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement, which tried to establish a gold standard for the enforcement of intellectual property rights. If you remember, the main problems with Acta were that there were efforts to keep the negotiations completely secret. It included a passage on criminal sanctions against alleged copyright infringements, and it included also a passage stating that there should be cooperation between parts of industry to fight against alleged copyright infringements. So this would have allowed companies to monitor communications, to implement sanctions and carry out censorship outside the rule of law in the name of enforcing copyright. So in short, it was a major threat to our freedom of communication, and it was a war against access to information. So for 5 years, we and many other NGOs worked on the basis of leaks and rumors only. We kept on fighting, even though winning was very unlikely for a long time. We produced booklets, fact sheets, we wrote blog posts, and had many discussions with parliamentarians on this topic. And then on 4th of July, the European Parliament rejected Acta. But most importantly, the fight against Acta was won by thousands of people who went into the streets and protested in over 200 European cities.
CleanIT is a project that's symptomatic of the approach of the European Commission to launch projects that they then claim to have no responsibility for. When I started in 2009, there was already a project underway organized by the Home Affairs section of the European Commission to have websites deleted if there was a suspicion that they were supporting terrorism or containing hate speech. There was no coherence, no plan, no attempt to limit infringements of fundamental rights when these sites were being taken down outside the rule of law. We single-handedly campaigned, brought in, encouraged industry to oppose that project, and successfully killed it. At the last meeting of that project, I was approached by somebody from a Dutch ministry saying that he was planning to launch a project for cooperation between internet providers and the police to address illegal content online. And I said, well, if you can build a project which learns from the past, which has fundamental rights as a key aspect of the thinking from the start, then EDRI can get involved and we can try to achieve something. A year later he said, great news, I have funding from the European Commission, do you want to get involved? And I said, do you have a plan which learns from the past? Do you have a plan which will stop the same mistakes being made this time as last time? And he said, no, I don't. And so I said, well, we can't join then. A year later, I was approached by an industry participant saying, oh my God, this thing is god-awful. Here are the draft conclusions, please fix it. The conclusions were a wish list of everything that anybody that wants restrictions on the internet would want. Voluntary removal of content, real name policies for social media, voluntary upload filtering, extrajudicial lists of sites that the government doesn't want you to see that should be taken offline outside the rule of law. So we publicized this leaked document. There was a big outcry in social media. There was an outcry in the European Parliament. There were numerous parliamentary questions tabled. Suddenly, Commissioner Malmström, the Home Affairs Commissioner, went on Twitter saying that even though she was paying for it, it was nothing to do with her. And as a result, the final document of CleanIT was a great deal weaker, contained basically none of the dangerous texts, and that was the end of CleanIT. But this is an ongoing conveyor belt. There's CleanIT. There's another CleanIT every year or two, and we're killing them one by one. But it's hard work. Data retention is the EDRI issue par excellence. It was one of the reasons that EDRI was founded initially in 2002. George Bush in 1999 asked for data retention. The United Kingdom said, yes, sir, at once, sir. There were then 6 years of efforts to introduce it as a policing measure. This ultimately failed. The European Commission then said, let's pretend it's not a policing measure. Let's pretend it's a measure to harmonize the single market. And Britain said, fantastic. Let's build a directive around the lie that it's about the single market. And with a huge amount of pressure from the British presidency of the Council, the directive was finally adopted. EDRI's campaign continued from 2006. Our members raised legal actions in various EU member states. And finally, the Irish and Austrian member, the Irish member of EDRI, Acta Österreich, and some Austrian, a lot of Austrian citizens, brought a case to the European Court of Justice. And a few weeks ago, the European Court of Justice said what we knew 8 years ago, which was it is patently illegal. And it then overturned the directive. And the data retention directive is dead, for now.
And then very recently, we also had a big dossier from the European Commission, which included, the abandoning of net neutrality. So basically in 2010, Commissioner Kroes, when she took office, when Commissioner Kroes took office in 2010, she's responsible for the digital agenda. She announced that net neutrality was very, very important to her and that she would do everything to safeguard it. And in a hearing in front of the European Parliament, she even drew a little heart next to this item on her agenda. And what she then did was basically a pretty clever delaying tactic, because we only had consultations after consultations, and until 2013 there were 6 public consultations in total launched. In the meantime, Commissioner Kroes sent out very mixed messages saying that she would safeguard net neutrality, but that also campaign services were very important. So until the publication of the proposal in September, we didn't really know if net neutrality would be dead or alive. So then, when she published her draft proposal in September, we had the confirmation that net neutrality was indeed pretty dead, because it was basically trying to legalize the Drosselcom plans of the Deutsche Telekom. It was allowing campaign or so-called specialized services and thereby creating a two-tier access to the internet. And it was making it possible for service providers to censor communications outside the rule of law. So together with a couple of other NGOs, we ran a very energetic campaign called SaveTheInternet.eu. And via this platform, people could send emails to parliamentarians or call their parliamentarians and even send faxes. I think in the end, over 20,000 faxes were sent to the European Parliament. But Joe here will explain more about our fight on net neutrality tomorrow in his talk. Yeah, in the end, the European Parliament adopted a very strong text, and we won against the Commission and against the big telcos. So we got rid of all this in the past 5 years, and now it's really important that we build on these victories and that we really prevent bad proposals from coming up again in the next 5 years. So what can come up in Brussels in the next term? First of all, parts of Acta might come back in a trade agreement and also in upcoming EU proposals. Parts of Acta are already, in fact, already returning. For example, in 2 weeks ago, when was it? 2 weeks ago, there was a big internet governance conference in Brazil called Net Neutrality. And the text that came out of this conference looked an awful lot like Acta. It included the cooperation between industry to get rid of alleged infringements, and it included a term on, well, it included fair process, which we also already saw in Acta. Fair process makes it look as if there were safeguards, but actually it's a pretty meaningless term. Then in the next term, the European Commission will also possibly revise the IPRED directive. It's the Intellectual Property Rights Enforcement Directive. And it already gives added powers to rights holders and their representatives to act against alleged infringements. And in Germany here, it has created the Abmahn industry. So in June, the European Commission will publish a white paper in order to announce what its plans are for the copyright reform. But it's very likely that it will revise IPRED. The Commission has also another directive in its drawer, the so-called IPRED 2 directive, which aims at harmonizing criminal penalties against copyright infringements. This IPRED 2 directive was supposed to be launched in 2010, but then it got postponed and postponed again. And after the shitstorm against Acta, the European Commission basically wanted to avoid any kind of fuss from the internet, especially before the European elections. And then the European Parliament will also be asked to ratify the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP or TAFTA in short. And, well, we don't know yet what's going to be in it since the negotiations are taking place behind closed doors again. But we expect provisions on data protection and privatized enforcement again.
Well, as I pointed out with regard to CleanIT, the European Commission is strongly in favor of not legislating and putting pressure on industry in order to implement any law, but most particularly intellectual property law online. So in September, the European Commission is going to launch a new set of so-called memoranda of understanding between internet intermediaries and IPR holders in order to enforce copyright law. We already see in the US there is an agreement between the White House and the online advertisers to block payments. There's a White House payment provider memorandum of understanding. And the privatized enforcement push that's being done in the US is being replicated here as much as possible. It makes sense for the Americans to want global American companies to implement US law on a global level. It's not very nice, but strategically it makes some degree of sense. It makes absolutely no sense at all why the European Commission or European governments would want American companies, particularly in light of recent revelations, to be implementing regulation of our freedom of communication, but that is very strongly what they want. And if there's any doubt, there was an an interview with the Director General of the Networks and Connected Society Director General of the Commission, and he said that internet companies should be intervening in online communications in order to uphold the values of society, and that is what they explicitly want. After the overturning of the Data Retention Directive, it is extremely likely that there will be a new proposal on data retention, except it is likely to be a lot broader than the existing directive in order to cover e-communications more generally. That's going to be quite a long and difficult battle, but it's one which is close to inevitable. And we're also going to have separately increasing calls for surveillance by internet companies, particularly if the net neutrality dossier goes the wrong way and there's more technical capability for ISPs to control traffic flows for their own business purposes. That will be repurposed without any question, also for law enforcement purposes.
And then we will also have net neutrality returning. The European Parliament just adopted a very strong text and strong amendments in order to safeguard real net neutrality. But now the Council of Ministers of the European Union will have to come to an agreement. So that means that ministers responsible for telecommunications from 28 member states will have to agree on something. And then this dossier is coming back in a second reading to the European Parliament. So this means that the European Parliament will have to stand by its very strong position, and it can only be overturned if it allows this to happen. So the upcoming elections are really crucial for the future of net neutrality. But the elections are also crucial for all of the other points that we've just mentioned, because now we really have a chance to be proactive. We have the opportunity to prevent bad proposals from coming up again, and we can make sure that the right people are going to sit in the European Parliament. So in the past weeks, we have worked on a solution in order to achieve this, and we launched the WePromise.eu campaign. So yeah, on WePromise, you can basically show your candidates that you're caring for digital rights, and you can promise to vote for a candidate that stands up for digital rights as well.
And at the table next to the door, you will find little flyers that explain what the Charter of Digital Rights is. And basically, the more candidates, the more voters that sign up to WePromise, the more it shows candidates that people care, that particularly younger people care, and the more digital rights can be brought into the election campaign. And the more we do now, the easier our job will be later. The EDRI office in Brussels loves the challenge, but we also like winning easily. So if you can help us win a little bit more easily by signing up to WePromise, we would be very grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe and Kirsten. I think we still have just a minute or something time for maybe one last question. And I don't know if we have a microphone, but otherwise I have an interesting question. In Germany, we witnessed that the European election campaign is mainly dominated by the election of the new commissioner, as well as especially the right-wing parties, so the AfD. We have the similar parties in other countries. How do you make sure that, except of your campaign, that digital rights is also a topic in the upcoming election and not just a side topic?
Well, it's simply down to showing candidates that people are going to vote on this basis. In European elections, far fewer people vote than in national elections. Far fewer younger people vote anyway. So with a comparatively small number of younger voters will be really compelling, because you're bringing a new electorate into the election, you're changing the balance. But if this is not communicated to candidates now, they won't know and they won't care. If they can rely on you not to vote, then they're happy. You may not be as happy after the election.
Yeah, so go on wepromise.eu and sign the petition. Voila.
Yeah, let's do that. And thanks very much for this very interesting statements, what you do, and about your work and your organization. And we hope the election will be in your favor. And I'm sure there will be lots of work for you in the next few years. And
hopefully
thanks a lot again, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you.